welcome to our 2024 Classified Professional and Leadership Development webinar series. I am Dingjo Curry, Director of Leadership Institute for Tomorrow in Higher Education Leadership Specialization at CSU Fullerton. We have closed caption. I want to remind you that this closed caption is available for you if you prefer to use it. Our Classified Professional Leadership and Career Advancement Seminar Series, this is sponsored by the California Community College Chancellor's Office and hosted by the Leadership Institute for Tomorrow, LIFT. LIFT offers a variety of programs from webinars to institutes, workshops, and the publication Lift Your Voice. So thank you to the Chancellor's Office and the California Community College's Classified Senate board members in working with me on these webinars. Now, though the webinars are designed for classified professionals, the content should be useful to anyone and everyone. And this is your first time joining us. Welcome and congratulations. Now, why is it important for us to enhance our capacities and skills so everyone could rise in the organization? I think the answer should be pretty simple to you. We are all working toward the same goals and new vision together. So I want to take the opportunity to review the California New Vision 2030. And if you're not from California, you can take a look at what we are working and think about what your organization, whatever your organization may be, what's the organizational goal? This is our systems goal for the entire state. So Vision 2030, under Chancellor Sonia Christian's leadership, we're now working on Vision 2030 goals. The strategic direction for Vision 2030 plan are equitable baccalaureate attainment, equitable workforce and economic development, and generative artificial intelligence. And there are three goals for Vision 2030. Goal number one is equity in success. Goal number two, equity in access. And goal number three, equity in support. So whether it's fiscal objectives or student success or equity-related goals, as you can see here, they require us to all work in unity to achieve them. So when we grow professionally, when we grow personally, and we improve our work and relationships, our students do better and achieve more. That's why it's important for us to engage in a variety of topics to enhance your skills and capacities, to enhance our relationships together when we work together, because you are the ones who directly or indirectly impact our students. When I say indirectly, many of us have jobs in the back office. We may not see students on a daily basis. Certainly they're walking about on our campus, but our work may not directly. But you can be sure that regardless of what your roles are, you impact students. So our webinars are designed to elevate everyone's capacity and head in the same direction. Our today's topic is the power of partnership, building strong relationship with your boss for success. You know, when you think about it, besides your significant other and your family members, we spend the majority of our time working. So this relationship with our immediate supervisor is important to the well-being of our mental and emotional health every day, and to how well we function in our work. This relationship is critical. And I think you know that from personal experience. When a bad boss just ruins your day, doesn't it? Sometimes it's from the moment that you walk in, that relationship starts for that day. So most of the time, we don't have a say in who becomes our boss, but we can do something to help ourselves in having a positive relationship with our boss. And sometimes you have multiple bosses. Some people that, have more than one boss. So I want to start the topic right away by introducing our panelists today. Mary Abijay, we're very privileged to have her with us today. She comes from outside the community college system. She's the author of Managing Up, How to Succeed with Any Type of Boss. And she's the president of CareerStone Group. Next, we have Julie Clevenger. She's the director, Chancellor's Office, Operations and Government Affairs in the Coast Community College District. And Hope L. She's the Executive Assistant, Office of Instruction, Institutional Effectiveness at Chaffey College. And Dr. Whitney Yamamura, Chancellor of Coast Community Colleges. So let me start with the first question with you, Mary. You wrote the book about managing up. Now tell us, can you start our discussion by telling us why is it important to understand this concept of managing up? And why should that be my concern to have a successful relationship with the boss?
I would love to. And thank you so much for having me on. Hello, everybody. This is an absolute honor. Let me start by making sure we're all clear that managing up is not about managing the person. As Jing Joe said, it's about managing the relationship. It's about doing what you can do from where you sit in that relationship to make it as productive and possible as possible so that you can succeed, they can succeed, and your organization can succeed. It is not about sucking up. It's not about being a sycophant. It's not about kissing someone's butt. It's about doing what you can from where you sit in that relationship to make it work. Now, couple reasons. Number one is, believe it or not, your boss matters. They have a lot of influence over your career trajectory. They have a lot of influence over the types of projects you'll work on, the teams you'll be a part of, and your exposure and visibility in your organization. So that matters. But perhaps one of the most important things that matters is that your careers matter. Nobody can, nobody will, nobody should care about your career more than you do. And if part of your career success, however you're going to define that, hinges in some part, large or small, on making sure you have a productive and positive working relationship with your boss, with your manager, then it's kind of on you to see what you can do to make that happen. Because the inconvenient truth is, you can't control the people and you probably can't change them either. Your boss is who he, she, or they are based on who she or they are. So it's really on us to take responsibility for our workplace experience, for our careers and our workplace relationships to make sure that we are doing what we can from where we sit to make that relationship work. And I think today we're going to talk about different ways to do that. But that's what I would say why you should be concerned about it, because you matter and your career matters.
Career really does depend on how well you can get along, right?
Yeah. Because when you have a great relationship, then opportunities come your way. When you do not work well with your boss, opportunities may pass you by. And if you care about your career, you really do want to try to, and by the way, it should be all your workplace relationships, but we are going to be focusing on the ones with your boss.
Right, because that dynamic is a little bit different. It has a power dynamic.
Well, it does. And, oftentimes we are either kowtowed by that power dynamic or that we think because of that power dynamic, there's nothing we can do. But that's not the truth, because I want you to think about being in a partnering in a relationship means that everybody has some agency. You have some choice about whether you want to, how you want to engage in that relationship. And this is really what Managing Up can help you do, is understand the different choices you have, the different strategies you have to deal with somebody who may have different preferences than you, different levels of power, different perspectives, different experience, different expectations, how you can figure that out and work with them.
Thank you. I'm glad you qualify that. It's really this relationship, this dynamic that you are trying to manage. So I'm going to turn to our entire panel here. Would you please give us a couple of examples of techniques that you have used, or maybe you observe someone else have used to manage that relationship with the boss that has worked well?
Thanks again, Jing Zhou, for inviting me, and nice to meet you, Mary. And Hope, for me, some of the techniques I go to that has helped is really pretty basic. It's about honesty and being genuine about your your role and where you feel like you are and your skill level, and asking questions when there's some confusion, and developing that trust. I think what Mary was talking about at the beginning, a phrase comes to me that it takes two to tango, and it really does. It's a little dance you're doing to get things done, and it takes both of you to do it, and you have to anticipate movements and then back off when it's not your turn. And so, yeah, the honesty and being genuine with your boss is helpful in those situations.
Thank you, Julie. Great answer. And kind of to piggyback off of what Julie talked about, some of my techniques are ask and observe. So directly ask them, what are the things that they like and don't like? What are their preferences? What are their pet peeves? But also observe their habits. There's always going to be things that they do that they don't think to tell you about when you ask. So as you watch and learn, you'll pick up on them and be able to incorporate those. Observation is also really important long-term because you learn their style of management and where you fit into that style. And in addition, of course, as in any relationship, communicate effectively and often.
My example relates to being a dean and the vice president of instruction. And so honestly, it might come up in later discussion. It was hard to pin my boss down, and sometimes the goalpost moved. And so what I got in the habit of doing was following up my my meeting with an email. And I knew there was a little bit of a risk because she didn't like to have things in writing, but she never expressed an objection for me to put it in writing. And so even though the goalpost still moved a little bit, and again, my responsibility to move with those goalposts, at least I had a comfort in having that written down, so that I could affirm we're okay. So now we're moving to this, and it was just helpful for me. And again, she didn't object, so I thought it was useful for her too to see where she was changing direction.
I love that. I'm just going to build on what everybody else has said. It's really about identifying, as Hope said, like who your boss is, who they really are, not who they should be or who you want them to be, but really pay attention to the communication, the collaboration preferences, how they operate. Don't judge them, because once you start judging them, especially negatively, you're going to get like all wrapped around the axle. Don't do that. Pay attention to who they really are. Then, of course, you have to really take a good look at who you are. How do you like to operate? What are your preferences? What is your communication style? And then you want to assess the gap. In what ways are you the same and in what ways are you different? And if you see a gap, then you get to choose, you should choose how you want to navigate that gap. You could decide not to do anything. Well, that person's just different than me, and I'm going to be okay with that. Can't get all like bitter and angry about it. Or I'm going to choose to make a request to that person, as Hope said, observe and ask, request them to interact with you in a different way. Or you can choose to adjust your interaction with them. What can you do a little bit more of, a little less of, a little differently, like Whitney just showed us, in order to really close that gap? And the important thing is that you stay in a place of choice around that, because when we are in the place of choice, we're in a place of empowerment. And so much of this is about embracing the platinum rule, right? So the golden rule, which we're all raised on, treat others as you'd like to be treated, works great when we all have the same preferences in the workplace, but we don't. So embrace the platinum rule, which is about treat people the way they want to be treated. So if you know your boss likes a lot of detail, then give them a lot of detail. If you know your boss doesn't like a lot of detail, lay off the detail. But it's really about trying to figure out ways that we can just slightly adjust and be strategic and intentional how we interact with others, so that we bring them closer to us and not push them away.
That's great. I learned a lot from your techniques, and you really ask when you don't know. Like Julie said, having that conversation, just having the asking what works and what doesn't work. And what you said, Mary, about this agency that I heard you a couple of times, making the choice. You can't change the boss. So it's like you can't change the situation that you're given to, but you can change how you adapt and how you confront and how you relate to it. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask someone here, Whitney. You are probably a person that among the panel have been the boss the longest. Okay, so you served a lot bosses for many on your career journey. can you tell us from the boss perspective, in that chair, being a boss, how would you like to be managed by someone who reports to you? What has really, for all those who have reported you on your team, what has really been some techniques that that worked well for you? Maybe you've heard other, supervisors talking together that what has worked well for them from those who they manage in the history of your career.
I like the theme that we've started on, which is ask. How would you like information presented to you? How do you prefer your structure your day? So sometimes I communicate that, but we all have assumptions that we don't know we're making. And so it's always, if it's in your thought mind to ask, you should. So I did say, hey, I don't have a set agenda and where I tick them off. That's doesn't fit my personality. I tend to tell a story to illustrate a point. Some of that could be a cultural influence as well. And so Julie and the vice chancellors and the presidents know that about me. And so I've been given space. So there's appointments that are not back to back. I get a little space in between because I can talk and tell a little story that makes my meetings go long. And at the same time, because the agenda has to move forward, I get a knock on the door, like, hey, your next meeting is in 15 minutes, so that I can pace myself and measure myself. So those have been really helpful to me. And I didn't ask for that, but it sort of came like, okay, given who you are, I got to make sure I put space between your meetings, and I should knock on the door so that you can wrap things up and then prepare for the next meeting. So good managing up for me.
I do have to say that he did, that Whitney might not have asked specifically, but when he first came in, he was so very clear on his working style and that he liked context around decision making. So I didn't have to figure that out. I met him where he was and where he said he was, and then over time developed, from the observation that Hope mentioned, different strategies.
And I love that as well, because for those of you who might be on this webinar who actually do manage others, you need to do what Whitney did, which is actually make it easy for people to manage up to you. Being really clear about your preferences, how you like to work, what's important to you, what's not important to you. Like my team, for example, knows that I hate talking on the phone. There's nothing I hate more than talking on the phone. So when they need to talk to me on the phone, they text me and say, hey, Mary, can you spend 5 minutes with me on the phone? So really having that conversation, and it should go both ways. But if you go have this conversation and you ask your boss all these questions, and by the way, if anyone wants to email me, I can send you a bunch of questions. Hopefully they'll turn around and ask you those questions. But if they don't worry. At least you got half the information you need to make this work, right? You at least have learned from them. And don't be afraid to have this conversation. I talk to thousands of people every year, and very few managers report to having their people initiate these conversations. And they really appreciate when they do. So Whitney, if one of your staff people actually initiated that conversation, how would you feel about that?
Oh, I would welcome it. Again, I sometimes forget what assumptions I have about myself that I don't know about. So when I come into a new situation, it's great that someone would ask.
Oh, let's move into a little bit difficult situations when you have a challenging boss. Now, can each of you give us an example of a boss who poses challenges to you, or someone else that you had? It doesn't have to be your own, because you observe and you colleagues talk to each other. So would you share how you or they who had the challenging boss approached it and have overcome the situation?
So again, we all have bosses. I do too, and all through my career. So you think, well, Dean, wow, you're managing a whole bunch of folks, but I have a vice president. Became a vice president. Well, my boss is the president. As a chancellor, I have a board, right? So make no mistake, wherever we are, there's always a boss. And so for me, I had a boss that was kind of volatile and a little unpredictable. And so I made sure he needed to vent. Had to give him the opportunity to vent. That's just the way he was. And then as I listened to him, I figured out what an action step that I could do. And so as he finished his discussion, I would say, okay, based on what you said, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Is that okay? Or is that what you want me to do? And I usually get, well, yeah, go. So then now I knew that I could go out and take care of those things. And then he had the opportunity to calm down because I figured out that that's how he functioned in some sense, and that I wanted to be able to implement what he wanted to have done. And so that's what I was listening for in the state of anger he was in.
A very long time ago, I had a boss that was absent. So, and I got some wonderful advice from another lady in the office that was a support person to someone else. And she said to me, sometimes a department needs to succeed in spite of the manager. And she also said, that person's reputation is your reputation. They're connected. And that gave me a very strong foundation for moving forward and some perspective. Because again, I was meeting a manager where he was, that was where they were in their life, and that was fine. And I adjusted my expectations of what this relationship was supposed to be like. And then you get the work done because it's the institution and your reputation that's attached to that.
I had a boss, this was also several years ago. As an executive assistant, we're used to a certain level of assistance, and this person really wasn't interested in that level of assistance. So when that person first started, I was used to, being more involved, and I answered an email, and that person was not happy about it and actually chastised me in that email with other people on it. And it was really embarrassing and really hurtful because I didn't mean any harm by it. And I had every intention of helping. But that person just did not want that level of help. In that particular case, like Julie said, I talked to someone else about it and said, how do I deal with that? And they recommended that I approach it directly, like talk to the boss about it and say, this is what happened. And this is how, I was terrified, but I did it. And it didn't ever happen again. So that was good. And it taught me a really valuable lesson about where I fit into that person's management style. I had to learn to accept that person didn't want that level, and I had to be okay with that.
I love that. So I'll talk about, so I own my own company, so I don't have any direct bosses, except I have now dozens of bosses called my clients. So I work along a spectrum of what you might call some difficult boss behaviors, And I'll say this, never let a difficult boss or a difficult boss dynamic hold up your career. Because truthfully, I'm sure Julie, Hope, and Whitney would agree that you will learn so much from a difficult boss, from a difficult person. You will learn so much about the kind of boss that you want to be, what works and what doesn't. You'll learn so much about strategy, so much about like aligning and adapting. So I'll just tell you a quick story about the first difficult boss I had, which was one of my first bosses, and is probably the most commonly hated boss. And that's, of course, the micromanager. Nobody likes the micromanager, right? The person that's always over your shoulder. They're telling you what to do. They don't give you any autonomy. And it's soul crushing. So if you have a micromanager, here's what I offer up for you. You've got to get ahead of that. You've got to be proactive with the micromanager. You've got to be like way far ahead of them, over communicate, flood them with information before they ask for it, like status reports, boom. I had this micromanager that literally wouldn't let me do anything without checking with her first. So what I did is, and by the way, this was for you youngsters out there, this was before everyone was on email all the time. I used to print out my to-do list every day and put it on her chair. And then she would check it off and blah, 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 and like comment on it. And then I would put it back fixed, what I got done that day, every day on her chair. And then I started to notice, like that she had preferences around what was more important to her. So they put all her preferences at the top of my to list and all the truly important things on the bottom, right? Because she didn't really, she was a bad boss. Anyway, long story short, I did that. And then after a month, I reduced it to once a day, then 3 times a week, and then got on just a weekly cadence with that. And by then she gave me my own office and she completely left me alone. It was extra effort, but you know what? I had a nice list of everything I've ever accomplished in that organization, and it was worth it. It's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure because I got my freedom and independence. And everybody at the organization came to me and asked me how I did it. And because I was young and selfish, I didn't tell them because I was afraid if I told everybody how to free themselves, she would just start back up and come back to me. So I just think there's always a way to figure out a difficult boss if you're willing to try a couple different things.
I'm so glad you mentioned the micromanaging boss. That is very common. And there's also, all kinds of others depending on the personality. And what you said is really true. We learn a lot from challenging bosses. As I reflect in my own career, the one that have done a lot of things that just going against the grain that makes my hair stand up are those that I learned a lot of what not to do, right? When you do become a boss yourself. So it's like the challenges in our life. We learn from every challenge we have, and that's not any different in managing a difficult relationship with a boss. So I may not have good questions. I'm going to turn right now to continue to look at this challenging relationship and how do we turn challenging relationships around to be effective and powerful relationships. How can we turn a relationship that maybe a boss just can't trust you, right, to a trusting relationship? So I hope you would like to pose some questions, and Julie as well, for Mary, who after all, Mary's written a book about managing up on this topic. So I want to take advantage of Mary being here and ask some questions that maybe other your colleagues may want to ask me, not necessarily come from you. Hope I'll turn to you first. What questions do you have for Mary?
The first question I have is how do you work with a boss that does not use your skills effectively? So in other words, they take on things that you can help with, but they don't really take your help.
Ah, such a great question. So I'm going to give you some ideas, and then I'm going to invite the other panelists to give some ideas, because really this is an art form. There's a little bit of science to it, but there's a lot of art to it. And so much of it really depends on who that person is and how they operate. So I will say this, first of all, if this is happening to you, it's probably a lot more common than uncommon, right? And people sort of resist delegating, if you will, for lots of reasons. So you're going to want to kind of pay attention to who you're dealing with. Like some people don't delegate or use your skills because they think it's just easier to do it themselves. Like it's just faster if I just do it. We women are very guilty of that. I'll just do it myself, so they don't use your skills. Or sometimes they think that you already have too much on your plate and they don't want to bother you with more stuff. And then quite frankly, some people are just control freaks, right? So you're gonna have to like figure out what might be driving this behavior. That would be very helpful so that you don't make a big story about they don't like you or they don't trust you. All right, so a couple of things. One, you are going to be proactive about this. So you are going to have to do some sort of an intervention in this situation. I would start, one way I would suggest starting is identify some concrete tasks and projects that you could or should be doing. Really specific, like I should be planning your travel. I should be, grading those papers, whatever it is, like a concrete list, not like, oh, I could take on more. That's too vague. Be concrete with your list, what it is that you could be doing for them, why you should be doing it. And this is the most important part, how it's going to help them, what's in it for them. So plan this out, then go have a conversation with them and let them know there are things that you could do to help make their work life better and to make a better use of their time. And if you know what they care about, like if they want to be published or they want to do this, you can say, if I take on this for you, then this will give you more time to actually work on that book you're working on. So make it about that. So have a conversation. But if they say no, know that no is not always for forever. It might be for today. So for example, I have an assistant and I never let her do my calendar because I'm a control freak about my calendar. And I never let her do my airfare because I'm a control freak about where I sit in the airplane. So, you're going to carve out some things, and as they get to know you, there'll be more. The other thing I would say is learn their preferences around the task you take on. So I think, as Hope and Julie both said earlier, like really learn what their preferences are on these tasks that they're taking on. Also take a look proactively at their schedule, at their calendar, at their tasks, and get a head start. So for example, if you know that your person has like a certain report due quarterly, like a month before the report's due, why don't you say, hey, how about if I start on this report for you? Or better yet, just start the report and say, hey, I was trying to like take some time off trying to free up your calendar. I've already started this for you. Let me know what you think. So some of that's kind of like proving what you're doing. And then finally, my last suggestion would be, when you're making this request about taking on more responsibility, doing more work, and by the way, it's a request, not a complaint. Inside every complaint is a request, to learn how to make that request. Also, show them how taking on these tasks or these responsibilities is going to help your career growth. So your manager should also be caring about your career development and your career growth. So it's okay to say something like, I'd really like to work on this project. I would love to learn more about how you do it and why this is important to the university, and then explain how you're going to do it and blah, blah, blah. But don't leave yourself out of that conversation in your career growth. And I know I've said too much, so I'd love to hear how other people would handle that.
When I was a classified professional for 28 years before taking my first management role. And when I took my first management role, giving the admin duties to the admin was really difficult for me because that's where I was comfortable. That's what I knew. And it was one of those frank conversations from someone, and she touched on all those things that you just said. This is why this needs to happen. This is where you are in your career. So she appealed to me. And then she said, also, this is where I want to learn, and this is what I want to. So it was such a good setting of the stage because it was so comfortable and respectful, and she understood that it wasn't personal that I was on why I was doing those things. She didn't take it personally at all. She just said, okay, Julie, it's time to give those things up now. And it was really, really good. Another example for me.
Well, I love that, Julie, because that's another reason why people don't give up responsibilities, because they're really comfortable. Like doing some of those things is what made them successful. And they also might really enjoy some of those things. So I loved your story. I thought that was such a great example.
Yeah, what you are good at may not be something that you actually enjoy doing, what you're happy. What is the one thing that you do when you're very, very happy, right? When I do this task in my role, I just feel joyful. So a lot of times people will hand you things because you you do well, but you may not really enjoy doing it. I think one of the things is it's always communication. Communication is so key. It's advocating for yourself in that way that you can let your boss know, you know what, I'm really good at this. So just, when you need that, lean into me. I enjoy doing that too. Or here's a set of skill I really want to learn to do new. So I love for you to throw some things at me so that I could grow in that area and let me know how I'm doing. So it's really just making a note, because let's face it, bosses can't remind. None of us can remind. So it's the more
bosses
you
aren't mind readers. And something else you said, Jingju, is that it's, just because the boss might enjoy it or they might be good at it, it doesn't mean it's the best use of their time. So part of what we're doing when we're managing up is we're helping people maximize their effectiveness and their proficiency. So I love finding my own airfare, but let's be honest, like it's not the best use of my time. And I really should give that up and stop being such a control freak.
Just wanted to echo that as well, to say that you should appeal to your boss saying, hey, I can free up some time for you to do X, Y, and Z, or just free up some time for you to think. And also say, for my sake, I'm here to support you. This is one way I can do that. my added thought would be if you do get, I really like to asks, can we try a couple of times? Can we do these two things? And then let's reassess. So if it still makes you uncomfortable or nervous, we can talk about it at that point. So let's just do this one thing or these two things and make it a trial. And then they might be more open to a trial than to think that, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna be scheduling my own flights again, and I really like doing that. Let's just try.
Whitney,
Okay.
that's brilliant. Experiment, a pilot, trial. Love, love, love it. I'm going to steal that idea in my next
Great.
presentation.
That's great. Hey, hope you got a lot of answers to. How about another question you have?
And I actually reached out to my 4CS board members and got some questions from them. And one of the questions that I got from that group is, how do you navigate your professional advancement when you have a dysfunctional boss relationship?
Yeah, so yeah, you just do, right? You just navigate. So first of all, there's a couple of things. I do think well, it depends on what kind of dysfunction it is, right? But as we talked about before, like you need to make this work if you can. And by the way, when you have a dysfunctional relationship, there's three things, at least the Buddhists say, when you're faced with a difficult situation, there's three things you can do: accept it, change it, or leave it. So if it's so dysfunctional you can't accept it, then you're going to have to either face it or change it or leave it. So in order to change a dysfunctional relationship, it's going to depend on where dysfunction is stemming from. So for example, if it's a micromanager, we're going to try some strategies around that. If it's, let's say that you boss is a nitpicker, which is not the same as a micromanager, then you're going to have to figure out what he or she or they is nitpicking. And you're going to have to decide to pick your battles. If you're Whitney's example of he had a boss that was very volatile. So Whitney learned not to take it personally and to pick out what it was that he thought the person wanted. So it's by identifying the dysfunction and seeing what you can do. I also think it's about having effective conversations, like Julie and you talked about, Hope, around what are their preferences, their priorities, their pet peeves, and asking this question: what is it I can do more of, less of, or differently in order to work well with you? Like really have that conversation. I would also suggest you reach out to other people for advice and coaching because that can be very helpful. You might reach out to people that have worked for this person before, like former classified assistants classified professionals who have worked for this person, see what tips they have. But at the end of the day, if you can't make this relationship work for you because it's so dysfunctional, then you might want to consider finding a new position. And that's what I have to say. Julie, Whitney, what would you say?
I would say that there are more eyes on you than just your boss in those situations. And if you can handle that relationship with the qualities and skills that all the less dysfunctional, not dysfunctional managers are going to need, and model those things, then you're going to be a commodity. You'll be wanted in their offices. So the confidentiality, the integrity, those really core things, and just not getting into the fray and sometimes the chaos that comes with a dysfunctional manager, because everybody's watching. It's back to that, his reputation is your reputation, or their reputation is your reputation.
Get involved as, the 4C group, right? Other sort of networking opportunities. Make sure you have somebody for self-care to vent. Retail therapy, go out for drinks, do something like blow off steam, because you're human too. And you've got to process what you've experienced as well. The other, on a practical basis, is regardless of the dysfunction of the boss, usually if you ask them and say, hey, I want to do this professional development activity, can I go to this workshop? Or, hey, there's a half a day program on X, Y, and Z, can I go? Again, occasionally you might have someone like, no, I need you sitting at the desk all the time. Well, that's going to tell you something too. But more often than not, you can continue your professional development no matter what.
I agree. And it's important to identify, like, this question is, I love this question because it really opens up a lot of thinking. So Is the relationship dysfunctional because you're just different people? Is the relationship dysfunctional because this person just isn't a very good boss, or this person isn't a good boss for you? Or is this person just a really difficult person? So the first thing you also have to do is take a look at yourself. What are you contributing to this relationship? How are you showing up in this relationship? If you've determined that the relationship is dysfunctional, if you determine that the person is dysfunctional, then those are a whole different set of strategies. So I would take a good look, zoom out a little bit, meaning like take yourself out of the situation, look down in as objectively as possible. And once you've like decided that you've done everything that you could truly do to make this relationship work, if it still doesn't work, then it really is time to start looking around. Now, that said, if you're working for someone who's toxic, that's a whole different story. So someone who's a screamer, a shouter, a bully, someone who is demeaning, debasing, abusive, then you really do have to protect your mental health, your psychological health, and your physical health, because working in a toxic situation is not good for anybody. It's a very serious situation. And I love what Whitney said about making sure in any case that you have a good support network, because what happens when we're in dysfunctional relationships, whether they're at work or at home, is it starts to demean our self-esteem. It starts to take away from our self-confidence, and that's not a good place to be.
That's great. And I was wondering, circling back to you, Ho, since you asked that question about career advancement, that maybe you can share a little bit about in your own career advancement, what strategies have you used, approaches that have you applied that played a key role in propelling your career advancement despite of your boss?
To circle back to the example I used earlier, I did decide that I think I had that boss for probably about a year and a half, and I made the decision that it wasn't a good fit for me. So I did actually leave that position at that time, and moved on to another position for a while, and that turned out to be the best thing for me. So as much as it's scary to think about saying, I'm going to get up and leave, sometimes it can turn out to be the best thing for you. I mean, if you're willing to accept it and you're willing to do it, that's great. But at some point you may look at it and go, but I just don't want to do this anymore. I want to be able to do something more. And that's what I did. And it was pretty scary, but it actually worked out for the better, I think, for me. So in that case, it was a big decision to make, but I did make it. Some other things that I've done, just specific strategies. Of course, I think some of these are ones that any of us would use. Building relationships, being proactive instead of reactive. I know Mary talked about that earlier. Prepare ahead. And just make yourself a valuable resource. Make that person believe that you are a valued resource and you have information and help to offer. One of my other techniques that I use is something called no surprises. Don't let your boss be surprised by something that you could have prepared them for. And that could be any number of things. There are a lot of things that you might be aware of that maybe your boss isn't yet. Don't let them be surprised by those things. Share what you know, give them a heads up. Even if you don't have all the details, but you just know something is out there, let them know, because you don't want them to be blindsided by something that you could have given them some information about.
Great. All right. Well, let's move to Julie. I want to talk to you. And now the reason why I have you and your boss together, there's reasons for that, right? And you agree that you and Whitney as well to be open and be vulnerable, if you will. I wanted you to see if you can share this. And that is a strategy that when you have something, you have an agenda that you want to accomplish and move forward. And that may be something that you want to, it may be the boss doesn't know yet. So what kind of strategies have you used to have Whitney come along and say yes? Whitney, you're going to find out now how that really works with Julie.
I know. And the question that you gave me, it said hidden strategy. And I'm like, well, if it's hidden, I'm not going to say it here. That won't be beneficial. But with Whitney and I, there really isn't any hidden strategies. I mean, he was so upfront when he first came on about how he works and how he makes his decisions, that I use what he's told me. Some of the things I'm careful about maybe are timing. I'm not going to approach him with something that is going to require a lot of headspace, as he calls it, when he's back to back in meetings. Or if headspace is taken by something that it can't be interrupted at the moment. What I have done is I'll preview. We don't need to get into this right now, but there is something that's coming. And when you have time to think about it, and on those, then he can say, no, I can do it now. Now's a good time. Let's get this done. Or, okay, let's do this in a half an hour or so. But what Hope said about no surprises, that's another strategy that's not hidden. There aren't any surprises. We can't have it that way. Things are moving too quickly here and in most of our offices that you can get surprised without even trying. So anytime you have an opportunity to let them in on something, then we got to do it.
Yeah, the surprises, I mean, I go back to the last question that we talked about, even when you're thinking about, oh, you applied our job already, right?
Oh,
Like you don't want to give your boss a surprise that you did not apply. You've already become a finalist. I always tell people that let your boss know, have that conversation. You're looking for change and growth in your career and have applied for a position, because that kind of surprise is really devastating. Now, do you feel free to tell Whitney what are some of the things that, Whitney has been most helpful to you in your work? Just have a conversation with Whitney.
I think something I haven't told Whitney that was really helpful to me is how he talks about me and my role in his
You want to
office.
talk to Whitney? Tell
Sure.
him, you.
All right, Whitney. One
Yes.
thing that's really helped me that I probably haven't mentioned to you before, I know I haven't, is how you speak about me when I'm not in the room. And it develops a respect among our cabinet because they all know also the role I play in this office. And I don't know for sure that you've done that, but I've gotten signals from, yeah, he has. I've gotten signals from others that you have, and it has been very helpful because if I send an email, it gets answered because they know that it's not just me. I'm on a mission for something. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. We talked before. I think it's valuable in general, not just between you and I. You had mentioned before that I told you with Strength Finders, I'm a context guy, and so you've always been willing to feed me the context of what's going on within how people function, because you've been at the district so long, and that's really been invaluable. And I also appreciate, and I've told you this before, you're very careful to delineate, this is my experience, this is my lens for how I see this particular issue or the people involved in this issue. It could be different. Someone else is going to tell a different story. And yet, because you try and be so objective and try to say, well, there's another explanation that might be what motivated this person or why this decision was made. But here's my presumption. It's really helped me triangulate, because I am a context person, to figure out and navigate how I need to respond or make decisions. And the same thing when I said, hey, to Mary's book, I'm a big introvert. And so putting me in a big crowd, having me speak before larger numbers of people, most people don't think that in terms of where we are in leadership. Well, you can't be an introvert. You taught. How can you teach and be an introvert? There's all kinds of introverts that teach and occupy all different levels. So again, appreciate you always trying to protect me from having to do that big public, huge event.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it. Yep, on the Strength Finders thing, when Whitney let me know that about his strengths and Strength Finders, that opened the conversation, and he asked me what mine were too, and empathy is the top of my list. So I think by giving him that insight, he understands, and I've come to him and said, okay, I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to be too sappy because my empathy is on high. So just knowing that about each other was extremely helpful. We hit the ground running pretty quickly in our trust and our honesty with each other in our working environment because we understood where we were coming from and what our strengths and not so, I don't like the word weaknesses, but maybe not our biggest strengths are.
And Julie, let me tease you about being empathetic too. So that
Yeah.
because I have that kind of sense of humor. So you're very indulgent in that way. So thank you.
For everybody on this webinar or watching the recording, what it means to actually build a positive, productive working relationship, how to manage up. They have both demonstrated in this conversation, first of all, really good self-awareness, really awareness of who they are and what they're bringing to the table. They've also demonstrated a great interest and curiosity and acceptance of what the other person's strengths, weaknesses, preferences, priorities are, and a willingness to find ways to adapt to that. And they've also demonstrated the willingness to talk about it for transparency, for honesty, for authenticity. And these, my friends, for anybody watching this, they have just modeled for you exactly what it looks like to manage up. They don't resist what is. They accept each other as they are. They embrace their strengths. They help to build up the things that are non-strengths. And they're actively looking for ways to make sure they are building a productive and positive working relationship. I'm taking you guys on the road with me because this is this is gold, baby.
That's wonderful. I should have asked you, Whitney, to role play being a challenging boss or something like that. But that was great. It's totally unrehearsed.
I don't think he could do it. I think he's too nice.
I appreciate that authenticity. And so I'm going to turn to you and Mary and Whitney. At the end, what is one or two very concrete and very specific action or advice that you have for all of our participants today, how they could manage their boss well so that they can have successful and effective relationship? Something that they could turn around and say, yeah, I could take on that. I could try that. Give us some suggestions.
You hear the theme, ask. How do you like this information? Are you a type of person that prefers an agenda and to tick through the agenda? Or are you sort of more organic in how you want to go through topics? Are you a morning person? That will become obvious over time, right? Or are you a night owl? How do you work? Simple things too, right? When I walked in as a VP at a different college than I had spent decades at, my admin kept asking me, when are you taking vacation? When are you taking vacation? It's like, those are the last things in my mind. I don't really plan it. Well, that culture, they expected the admins to take the vacation at the same time their boss did. And I didn't know that. So once she told me that, I said, one, we don't have to sync vacations. You can take it whenever you want. But two, for your comfort level, I need to let you know when I'm gone. Again, whether you choose to go at the same time, I actually prefer the opposite. I'd rather you be there when I'm gone to help navigate and field things, and vice versa, so that there's somebody in the office. But that was the culture of that college, and I didn't know it. So ask and inform.
Do you have one final advice? Something that they could actually take action?
I'm gonna echo Whitney. Go have that conversation. As Hope said earlier, it's the preferences, priorities, and pet peeves conversation, ending with what can I do more of, less of, or differently to work well with you.
All right. Well, you've heard a lot of suggestions today, and hopefully you've taken some notes. I would like you to think about a particular action that you could take to try something with your boss, or if you manage others, also, you could be we all have boss, and we also, perhaps some of you also manage others, to think about something that you can do and to reflect on action that you can take. That if there's an action that you think that you learned today, you want to try, maybe you can share that with us. This is something that we want you to challenge yourself. That's something that you haven't done before and you learned today that you would like to try. That is great. The chat is open, then Myra said. So if you care to share that with our participants today, go ahead. And the other thing is, while you're doing that, would you make sure that you fill out the evaluation? Please, I ask you to click on that link right now and complete the evaluation, because if you do, you will be possibly one of the winners for Mary's book, Managing Up, how to work with any type of boss. We have bought a number of books, so I can tell you that you will have many winners here in the audience. So please click on that evaluation, fill it out, and you could be a winner for Mary's book today. Okay, and we'll notify you. So please fill out the evaluation. And I also want to share with you, our next webinar will be on April 19th. On Friday again at noontime. If you have enjoyed today's, please bring another colleague to join you and learn together. Next time, we're going to talk about a very important and very common topic. It's an imposter, breaking free from imposter syndrome. And maybe you don't even know if you have this syndrome or not. We will help you to diagnose. And maybe you don't have it and you think you have it. So we're going to go through diagnosis and empowerment for the imposter syndrome. And you see up here, please fill out the evaluation. Myra has put the link here, and we will send you the survey link again. The book is called Managing Up, How to Win Your Work and Succeed with any type of boss you have. So thank you so much, our wonderful panel. I appreciate you coming up and joining me in this webinar and being authentic in your responses. I appreciate you, Hope and Julie and Whitney, and of course, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good weekend ahead.